welcome to the fifth episode of Hum PR Karne Wale. And I have none other than Dr. Kiran Veigas. The last time we met, he was Mr. Kiran Veigas. I used to work under him when I was a rookie PR executive. And, now it's been like 5 years since we last spoke, sir, on a video call.
Yes, in fact, no, and time flies by, and so nice to meet you again and seeing you anchoring such a lovely podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's the blessings of, senior leaders like yourself who've been so kind and, so welcoming to the entire idea because we are warriors at the back end. Our bylines never come in newspapers, but we know how many nights we toil, how many days, we slog to be able to get this, coverage out, be it in television, be it in print, be it in YouTube. If you remember how, we had Venkat sir's discussion with Rachna Rana Day on YouTube, and that was very pioneering for both Happiest Minds and Factors alike. And there's
Yes.
so much of common history because tech was my first ever client to service. Tech was your calling. And, from an engineering background to, handling comms, and then now being Dr. Kiran Vegas. I mean, how has the journey been?
Well, it's a real interesting journey, keeps me always on my toes. I always believe, in the spirit of continuous learning, right? So there is some amount of learning that we do in a group, right? So when you're working with colleagues, you learn from your seniors, you learn from your peers, you learn from your juniors as well. But there's yet another learning that also a person has to do for himself, right? Himself or herself. They have to sit down, study, spend some time with books, right? Maybe invest in learning a course. And all of these things help us to know a little bit more about ourselves, right? We come to know a little bit about our strengths, most of us know, right? But knowing what our weaknesses are, right? And being able to work upon that, I think is something, I really cherish, right? And I try to spend time on, honing on various skills which I do not have. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. But, working in a company like Happiest Minds, which has so many, pioneering things that you're doing, and in the hot topic called AI, of
Yeah.
course, we're also, seeing Happiest Health come up. And,
Yeah.
I have personally seen you work in a very gentle manner. And it's mostly about being, work oriented and coverage oriented and, the common love for technology that, the team that we had shared along with Happiest Minds. So, I mean, how was the transition for you? Did you always plan to be into marketing or did you just stumble upon it?
No, very interestingly, when I first started my career, it was as a techie. I used to write software for mobile phones, right? And that was my passion then. And so I'm a telecom engineer by qualification, right? Engineering qualification. And I was among the lucky few. In the initial programming assignments I got was in mainframes, right? I did that for around 4 months or so, and that's when I got a chance to speak to a senior and say, hey, my actual qualifications is really in telecom, and I can really contribute in some of these areas, right? And I'm very good in coding. And when I got the first chance to work on one important project, I was able to, I toiled away because it was my first project. I toiled away and the results were good. And after that, I started getting more and more such projects, and I enjoyed it, right? I worked on a lot of cutting edge technologies in those days, right? And I worked for writing software on mobile phones. So, for example, Samsung's first Symbian mobile phone, I have written the device drivers for that, right? Then Motorola's phone that is called Moto Q, right? The Java enablement of that phone, I have led that project, right? I led that entire team, right? And some very interesting projects I worked on. And around that time, I wanted to pursue my higher education because I always believed that, I was a graduate. I had to, take the next step forward. And that's when I pursued an executive program from IIM Bangalore. And I was very lucky that I used to work at L&T Infotech those days, and the company then had sponsored me for that program, right? And as I even if before I finished that program, I made the switch into strategy and marketing, right? As part of it, right? My specialization, in fact, was strategy and marketing, and as that program, I kept on showcasing how we could do things differently, right? And that's how I made the switch. and I've been lucky throughout there. And I, in fact, incubated something called the shared marketing services at L&T Infotech. Yeah, and around that time, I actually got my first glimpse into comms, if I can say. And if I recollect what my first assignment in comms was, one fine day, early morning, right around 6 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from a senior, and he says, "I just want you to, I just get up, I pick up the call. He says, "I just want you to, the minute you get up, immediately rush to the airport, and I need you to go to Chennai." Right? And Chennai, I already set up a complete recording studio and everything is there. I need you to do a complete handle that entire photo shoot. It was a video shoot actually, video shoot and come photo shoot. Everything's planned. I'll send you the script. On the plane, you see, get prepared, and you have got to anchor the whole thing for the next 2 days, because he was unavailable, right? He had an emergency, he couldn't go. And so my seniors deputed me, and that, I think, was my first assignment, and I hit the ground running, and I loved it, right? And this was a new team which I had never even met, right? And we did very well, and the film that we made ultimately was showcased to some of the key customer who could not come to Chennai. Right, he was actually he was visiting our Mumbai and Pune offices at that time, but he couldn't come to Chennai, and we wanted to showcase what we were doing in Chennai, and it was a very big development center, right, DC. So we did that. That was my first assignment in comms, if I can say. And after that, I did get a few more comms related work. And then when I switched companies, I spent 12 years at L&T Infotech, and I switched company, and I joined a US company, right? And there I spent 1 year. I honed some of my comms skills there, because that company did not have a comms, department itself. So I set that up, right? And we did some really good work there. And after that, I joined Happiest Minds, right? Now, this is actually my 12th year at Happiest Minds. And one of the first things that when I joined Happiest Minds also was, one of the interview questions, in fact, was, what have I done, for an IPO? And how can I help? Because we knew in those days itself that Happiest Minds wanted to, do a very successful IPO. So that was the story. And I actually said, at L&D Infotech, I was part of a few key programs, but until the time I was in there, we did not go for an IPO. But I have worked on a few important projects which would help during an IPO, for a going IPO company. And so I worked on that, and I was very lucky also to be part of the team that anchored the IPO, right? And in fact, AdFactors is a very good partner for us during that entire journey of our IPO, right? And I cherish those relationships and the learnings that we also jointly had as a team, right? It was fantastic. And that's how I really, started honing my skill in comms, and majorly external communications. But over the period of time, I've also got a lot of internal comms also. I do play a part in that as well. And I take each of that as a learning, because ultimately, if you do not tell the story to an internal team, right, how could you possibly, amplify that to an external team, right? So it's very, very important that you are able to do both, and both the stories have to be in consonance. So these are things, I've learned over a period of time. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. This is something that I also pioneered at Serona Hygiene when I was the comms. Like immediately after Art Factors, I switched to comms because I was like, okay, I have good bosses, but I also have difficult ones, and I really want to see what goes behind the comms scenes. So, I did go into the comms role, and there we used to have Tuesday talkies. So every Tuesday, a story of an employee used to come in, how they joined Serona, how their journey has been, what their expectations from life are. And every person is a walking biography, so it's so beautiful, profiling them, capturing them, and making them feel seen and heard as well. Because the reason we've started this podcast, hum PR karne wale, is because we are unsung heroes. We are never recognized, we never come in a byline, we never actually come on television, but we've got our own share of stories. Like nobody would have known that you have developed something in Samsung, and Samsung is the phone I'm using to record actually this podcast. So I mean, this is a long journey, and you've been such a silent contributor in not just Samsung and Motorola, but also the biggest IPO companies. I mean, be it LTI, which is now LTI Mindtree. In fact, life has come so much of full circle. Mindtree was hostile acquired from Ashok Suta, who is your boss right now. and then the companies merged, and it is all like a shared history. And then LTTS was differently there. LTI was also a client of Ad Factors in the same team which I was servicing. And then Happiest Minds, of course. And you were one of my favorite comms, and you were my favorite client because you were so kind with your words, and you were so patient about your expectations. But my question to you is, I mean, does it not favor you if if you are not a journalist, or you don't come from an MBA background? And how did you make sure that it doesn't become a hindrance in your journey of PR and communications?
Oh, that's a very interesting and good question, in fact. So, actually, whatever background we have, no, we use that to our advantage, right? So, for example, if a comms person did not have a technology background, right? If he did not understand technology, telling that story becomes a little difficult, right? So, what you try to do, you try to simplify it in two simplistic words, which might not really convey the purpose. But when you have the technology background, I could very well empathize with whom, if I'm talking to an SME and I'm trying to convey a particular story out into the market, right? I'm able to understand that story well and figure out how to, give it that marketing flavor, right? It should only be a flavor, right? It should not be a marketing paint. When you paint the whole thing, you cannot recognize it again, right? It should just be that flavor, a subtle flavor that gives that you're able to showcase and bring out. It's like salt, no? If you put too much salt, the whole dish is wasted. But if you put the right amount of salt, it gives you that taste. But you can't put salt everywhere. Somewhere you'll have to put sugar also, right? So you should know that, and be. I think when you have the technology background, you can use that to your advantage. How to tell a very complicated process or a complicated technology in more simplistic manner, but still not oversimplify something, right? So that is, I think, a skill that helped me with. And second, also because I was in project delivery in those days, in my initial days, I realized very soon that I was put in front of customers because I was able to make, especially I used to work for quite some time in South Korea, right? And where English is not their first language. So being able to tell someone in a very simple way what we are trying to do and how we are trying to achieve it, right? We have written a very complex code, right? And it is doing something. But then ultimately, the first phone, you see a phone in that such a small form factor, right? The first phone that is built is not of that form factor. It is much bigger than a briefcase, right? The first phone, right? The hardware, etc., which is built. And then over a period of 6 months, 6 months, that entire hardware will slowly get compacted, and it ultimately comes into that small form factor that you actually see, right? So many things get changed. So during that entire process, you get to learn a lot of things and you get to build on it, right? And so these are things, it has actually helped me being a technology guy. Yeah.
Oh, that's actually so beautifully captured. And when you mentioned the language point, I immediately remembered your visionary, stance of letting Venkat sir, who has broken Hindi, speak on a Gujarati channel when there were quarter results. So of course we all aim for the ETs and the CNBCs of the world, but then actually coming on CNBC Avaz makes you reach Ahmedabad audiences, which are also very good investors. And you started from a mid cap company, gone to a small cap one. Happiest Minds has always functioned like a startup, and you've always been very pioneering when it comes to drones, when it comes to IoT, when it comes to AI. But that is the main question which I have with all comms people. You coming from a technology background, living in South Korea, you've seen AI probably take birth. So, what is your stance of AI in communications and PR? Is it going to eat up jobs, or is it going to make it easier? Is it making it tougher these days because of the content influx? What are your thoughts on AI in communications?
So, well, I always say AI is not really taking the job. But what happens is if a person doesn't know AI, right? The person who knows AI, that guy will take your job for sure, right? And this is not something unique what I am saying. This is what a lot of people would also say, right? And the fact remains this: it makes our life much more simpler, right? Now something that would take so many days to do, for example, even when we used to generate our annual report, that entire process of generating the cover of an annual report used to be close to 45 days, right? From creating the first, what the premise, what the cover should be, it going to design stage, creating multiple designs, shortlisting designs, finalizing the designs, and then getting the final cover. It would take 45 days. Now it takes less than 1 week with multiple iterations, right? I get to see a few covers done in just 2 days, right? Samples of the covers, and we're immediately able to roll it out for reviews and get the reviews, incorporate the review points within 1 week, max 10 days, it gets done. This is the third year in which I'm using AI, right? Our team is using AI for generating the cover of an annual report, right? This is just one example. In terms of content, right, people are using content, or they're creating content also using AI tools. But then we go back and tell the SME, hey, you have used AI here and you have created this content. Where is your unique stance here, right? And they say, okay, this is what I was trying to convey. Now, since we know technology, we're able to say, oh, is this what you wanted to convey? But maybe this did not come out. Now, let us rephrase it. Let's work together. Then we get that angle involved, right? And we ensure. So before, it was only about plagiarism, right? When you have to put out any article, it was only about checking how much of the content is plagiarized. Is it yes? Is it not? And how do you refine it? Now it is not only that, but it is also how much of that content is AI generated, and then making sure that not using AI for AI's sake, use it to simplify the language, right? But is it telling it the story that you want to tell? Have you captured the most important points? You can use it to structure your content, right? When you have written a big piece of content, now suddenly you want to make it a little shorter. You want to make it a little more in tune for a particular market, right? You want to emphasize on something, you want to suddenly emphasize on strategy here, so you can do all of those things much better with AI. But then we can always keep ourselves busy, right? So they say that the this is what I was telling someone when I was explaining to them how AI is overused sometimes, right? So there is, yeah, there is a developer or an engineer or someone sitting, or even let's say a blogger, right? He's writing a big piece of content and he's using AI to, he'll give one, two, three lines of it, and he'll use AI to create 10 pages. And then he submits that to his boss. And what does the boss do? He looks at 10 pages and says, oh, I cannot read this. He'll give it into AI and he'll say, give me a two-line summary of this, right? So we are just using AI for no purpose. So we have got to use AI for the right purposes, right? And that's when a technology is leveraged to its maximum. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, sir. You've been very precise in the way you explained AI actually fundamentally as a tool, fundamentally as something which is an enabler. Because 5 years ago, when we were compiling those coverage reports or daily news updates, it was a tumultuous task, and it kind of ate up our time to actually go to the journalists and pitch about Happiest Minds. But today, the relationship that exists is you writing something heartfelt on LinkedIn, which I can decode, that is not AI, in comparison to something within M dash or something with a lot of emojis, something with a kind of language that even as a non-language person you can decode. But here is my next question, because we are now coming in an age of Gen Zs, okay? You've been a pure play coder. You've been somebody who's worked hard, lived in countries, and you had a certain work ethos. Of course, there is a very much divide in how the north functions and the south functions, but still, can you see some difference in the new crop of Gen Zs that are joining your team, maybe in comms, maybe in other functions?
No, I definitely see that. And what I've always felt, no, the youngsters, the new breed of the Gen Zs, etc., they bring in something innovative because they think differently, right? And when you have people across different generations in your own team, you are able to address all the segments. Because now when we are recruiting, at a much younger talent base, right? And so is there someone who understands that talent base a little better? I might not be the right person for that. So, but if when I have a few team members who understands that, and that is the knowledge they bring to the team, right? So when we are writing a creative, we are creating some copy, we're making an
Hmm.
ad, right? We are creating a social media campaign, right? So they bring in that amount of innovativeness, right? And sometimes even we don't understand the language, right? So sometimes when I talk to my nephew, I'm not able to really decipher what he's trying to say. It takes some amount of time. Then he will take some time to simplify it in the language that I understand, right? But slowly over a period of time, I also understand some of those words, right? And this is what working with young talent helps us do, right? We regularly take a lot of interns, right? And working with interns also gives us that exposure, and it's a win-win to both, right? The best interns are also, whenever we get a chance, we also give them an employment opportunity. I have a few people in the team who have actually risen like that, right, over the years, who joined us as interns, and now they are senior marketers in the team. Yeah. And at the similar way, they also get to see how does an industry function and how they can also contribute. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, Gen Z as a generation lacks patience, lacks optimism also, which you and I had the fire in the belly, to service the client, wake up at 5 a.m. on quarter result days and, come out with the coverage, come out with the media relations. But what I really want to understand from you is that if you had to, go back in time and talk to your 21-year-old self who was just starting out, as probably a coder and then later, into marketing and PR, what is that one piece of advice you would give them to arm them with, the kind of challenges that you face today?
I would say always, don't stay at one place. Keep on moving, right? Learn something new, right? Be a better version of yourself than what you were, one day back, 1 week back, 1 year back. So learn some new skill, get out of your comfort zone, right? And I think that is something I've practiced over a period of time, and I continue to tell the same thing to myself, every time. Yeah.
No, that's actually a beautiful thought because, you've seen my LinkedIn. I've moved so many jobs. But always, I've seen that even if you've continued the same job for 12 years, which you've done with both your organizations, you've actually adapted, and that adaptation is very important because if you don't adapt, then, you are somebody who is extinct, who is not relevant to the society. This was so insightful, sir. But now I'll move to my favorite round, which is the rapid fire round. So, Kiran the coder or Kiran the PR? Who is your favorite Kiran?
Well, coder, I was definitely, I think that was the most fun I ever had in my life. So that was an easy one.
Oh,
I'm having
excellent.
fun now also, but I think I had a lot more fun then, I think.
Of course, of course. See, we always have favorites. I mean, even if you're a parent, I'm sure you have a favorite child, and it's not bad because we as humans are biased, which is okay. Um, what is that one tool which you use every day? In your PR functions as well.
Uh, no, I use all Microsoft tools and Adobe tools. I think without them, my day is incomplete.
And what is that one quality of Gen Zs which you wish other generations also had?
That spark, so when you tell something, you can see the excitement. It's, oh, they get so excited, oh, I want to do this, oh, I have an idea, I can change it like this. They're so eager to tell something to you. I love that.
What is your source of news for all things technology these days?
So multiple sources. So before I used to rely a lot only on print and digital. Now I've also, over the so many years now, I also realizes even through conversations, we learn a lot more, right? So I try to supplement all my sources of information. So in addition to the regular print, to all the digital sources, using various GPTs and various other things also. But I feel that conversation, spending time with people, listening, asking the right questions also helps.
No, that's an excellent thought, sir. And this has been one of my most crisp conversations, but one of the most insightful ones. I thank you so much for your time on this call today. And we're going to do a lot of roundtables. We're going to do a lot of other exciting stuff. And we would really want your time and your more insights and more experiences as we grow into this journey together of Hum PR Karne Wale.
Thank you very much, and the pleasure was mine as well. Yeah, I loved it.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.